Welcome back to Uncaged Leaders. I'm your hostess, Mariquita Solis, the Uncaged Heart Coach. This show is dedicated to the successful man who's ready to end the soul war and build a life of genuine courage and purpose. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest and my friend, Linda Tilson. Linda is a behavioral change strategist who sits with individuals who are ready to see themselves differently to rewrite their story. She does this by creating safe spaces where individuals feel empowered to explore their behavioral patterns and use the data that is revealed to make informed decisions that moves their lives forward. Today, it's her hope that women will step up to help men to have a better understanding of what actions they can take to support men in this world. So thank you for joining us, Linda. We're really going to talk about supporting men and boys, and that's your mission here in one of your missions, and it's a very admirable mission. So thanks for coming on to talk about this important work that you do.
Thank you for having me. And you're right, that is the mission. And yeah, it started really with having two sons.
Well, how old are your sons?
So my sons are 20 and 15.
Oh, okay, great. So you've seen the growing and emotional development throughout the years.
I really have. And it's been a journey because I come from a family of all sisters. So the whole idea of raising sons was all brand new to me.
Yeah, and I guess I always hear it's easier to raise boys than girls because boys are not emotional. And then I hear boys aren't as emotional as girls. So now what do you think about that? Is that true? Because you hear about the little girls crying and everything, and then do little boys cry as much as little girls, or what did you see in your experience?
Oh, it's interesting that you asked that question, and I haven't given it a ton of thought, but what I will say as you were talking about that, whether it was easier or harder, or whether they were more emotional or less emotional, um, definitely emotions do run deep, and some of the emotions that come up are that gruff, and that frustration that you see that definitely. But yes, they do have their moments of that softness that comes through. And, being that I had all sisters growing up, I don't have any of those, I guess, ideals about how to raise boys, and boys should be boys, they should be tough and non-emotional. If anything, I I guess I've raised them without having that expectation that they be tough and rough and emotionless. I don't that's never crossed my mind. It's been the opposite. It's been more like, let's express what we need to. Let's ask for what we need. When we get upset and frustrated, let's talk about it. What's behind that? And so that's been more of my, I guess, attitude in all the conversations that we have, really.
Yeah, well, that's very non-typical, I would say, atypical, because I know from my family and from watching the dynamic of what it is to be a man and to be gruff and to see that suppression of emotions and I mean my father. Now, I didn't have a very close relation. I would say I didn't have a very close relationship with my father. My brother is closer to him. Now, my father was very stoic. So I think that's why I did not have a close relationship with him because I could not connect with him emotionally. He didn't really talk about emotions and I think it affected me as a little girl and the fact that I didn't feel as close to him and it's it's something that I still kind of regret. We've had as I grew older, I had those conversations with him, but it still was not the same. I think my brother, because of that quietness, like where they don't show either one of them really shows feelings, um, they connected with that. And what about your father, Linda? Did you grow up with I mean, what was he like?
Oh, yeah. So he was always someone that I was close to. So the whole daughter-father bond. And so he would always listen to whatever it was that I had to share. And that was both when I was younger and then as I moved into adult life. And so he'd listen about my aspirations of entrepreneurship. He'd listen to about the challenges I might have in my career. He would listen to things that I would share about, my kids, all of those things. He just would be that person that would really just sit and listen and be there. And it was nice to have.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love my dad. We're just very, very different. I was more like my mom. She was very, very expressive and warm and everything. So yeah, it makes a difference. And I'm glad that you had that with your father. And so you had that role model. I mean, to also bring into your boys' lives where you didn't have to feel like they had to change and allow them to be who they are. And I was watching a program the other day, and it was a transgender couple. Now, they said they were not raising their children as any gender. Now, being from a very traditional home, but also being very open-minded, I listened to that. And I thought, wait a minute, I felt trapped as a young woman. I was a young girl in the girl box. And even now, I feel trapped as that, as a female coach, coaching men in this box where men sometimes don't want to hear that, right? And I
Hmm.
thought, gosh, how can you just look at me as a human being, right? Where I don't have to be a girl or a boy. And then I remembered that show and I thought, I got it now. I see why they're not trying to put anything because someone was questioning them and they said, but how is the child going to know how to behave if they're not a girl or boy? And what thoughts does it would that bring up to you?
Well, what it brings up to me is that's kind of like the whole gender neutral is how I've raised my daughter and my two sons. And so I don't necessarily tell my daughter you can only do feminine things in what you wear and what you do and how you uh, react or respond to different things in your environment any more than I do that with the boys. And so, all three of them, we've always talked about like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Oh, let's go out and explore those professions, either the spaces, the places, or people. That was one. Um, when we, watch movies, I'm not going to just say, well, um, to my daughter, oh, well, you can only watch, the feminine, romantic, heroine type movies, and okay, boys, you can watch all of the action movies and whatnot. I've never done that. It's like if whatever they want to do. If they want to, I mean, if my sons want to watch a romantic romance movie, well, then go for it. If my daughter wants to watch a race car movie, go for it. And they naturally will pick what they're interested in. And a lot of the things that when you're growing up as either a man or a boy or a girl, you're really you're choosing what feels aligned with you. And so there isn't necessarily the masculine and feminine thing that's going on that you have to be and do. You get to pick and to really put a label on you can only do these things because you're a girl and you can only do these things because you're a boy, then that puts people into boxes with labels. And then if you go outside of that box, then you're different or odd or weird or awkward, and then you don't belong. Well, that just seemed, and which was kind of what you were describing as being outside of things at times. And so I've always personally been a person that values inclusivity, um, and connection and unconditional love because as a mother you love your kids unconditionally. And so I look for the strengths in all of them and I champion them. And then, any areas they have to work on, I also do that. There was a story once that I spoken about one of my sons that we were on a family trip and he was sitting in the back of the truck and he was watching a movie. He was watching Forrest Gump. Well, all of a sudden I'm like looking back and the tears are running down in his eyes. And he says, that was really sad. It was the moment where the main character was visiting his wife who had, was it wife that passed away, the gravesite.
Yeah.
And so the love of his life, she died, and he was that scene. And so, am I going to say, what are you doing crying about that for? You're being really extra sensitive. No, I'm not going to say that. If anything, that's what I would want for my child, for my boys, for my men to be able to feel expression, anger, sadness, love, all of the different feelings, and to be able to express them and not have to hide them. Because when we're hiding our emotions and suppressing them, they're going to come out somewhere. So the healthier way is to have them and acknowledge them, and why would I discount anything that anyone would feel ever? I don't care who they are. I'm not going to do that.
So why is it important? I mean, what happens if they don't? What happens when you shut down your emotions or you deny them? What are the repercussions of that?
Oh, yeah, I think that you're unhealthy because you're learning that in order to be accepted or to be loved, then you have to show up in a certain way. So you're going to put the mask on and you're not going to be authentically who you are. That's not good for your heart because, you can have, heart conditions. That's it's kind of ironic that I say that, but you could. And you're not going to be able to regulate your emotions for sure. Because if you're stuffing them down and then everything just comes back up when you don't expect it, then you're not going to be able to regulate anything either. So that's not a healthy way of living. So it's better to name and feel things and to express things than to do the other. It's not strong, in my opinion, to keep them all in and bottled up and not share or express them. To me, that's weakness. Strength is when you feel safe enough in your skin to be able to be and to express and not worry about external validation or approval that it's right or wrong when you do.
Right. And what about unregulated emotions? I mean, how can that hurt and damage relationships?
Oh, it can damage them really easily because that's where resentment, regret, um, other types of frustration, that's where that lives because when you don't express it, then it's you're getting trapped inside your body, and so then you can't get it out. And so when you do end up letting it out, it's this force that can happen, and then you say things you don't mean. You can't, and when you say the words, sometimes people can forgive you for the words that you use, but they won't forget. And so do you really want to wait till it's so bad that it comes out like that? And the same thing too, like with grief. If a person's going through sadness and grief, not expressing that is also not healthy either. And yeah, I'm glad we're having this topic because I'm thinking more and more about the different things that can come up when you're raising boys who are becoming men, because all of these things come up at one time or another.
Yeah. And what is the most important thing really when you're raising boys for them to be able to have healthy relationships with their partners, would you say?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. So kindness to how they treat me, their father, and their brothers and sisters, and how do they treat their prospective partners? That's important. And so really at the end of the day, it's like my wish that I would have sons that can express their emotions, treat others with dignity, respect, and really know how to communicate, because anyone that can communicate effectively can build good relationships. And when you do that, then the whole society benefits as a whole, because that same boy that's in that family, he's out there being a husband, he's out there in leading in the workplace. He's out there in the community, giving back, all of these things. And so healthy boys breed and cultivate healthy men. And so again, everything rolls up what we have in society. And so lack of that is the opposite.
Yes, you're right. And you have a lot of experience with men and in hearing about their relationship struggles. What would you say is the biggest relationship struggle with men, young men today?
Mm. I think that they feel like they're being shut down. That's the one message that's coming out is that girls are saying mean and hurtful things, and then younger to middle age, let's say women, let's say if you're talking about the dating pool, is that they are saying, I'm independent, I don't need you, and if you're gonna come around, come correctly, right? Otherwise, I don't need this. So there's some negative connotations that are coming up. And so part of that is, the way that society has evolved with women having autonomy and being able to support herself because that's what we've advocated for is, if you, I don't know if you were ever told this but society definitely will say this, if you're a woman and your job is to get educated, your job is to get a good job and take care of yourself because you never know whether you will outlive your partner or not, let's say. So, take care of your finances, know how to do some common things like changing oil, pumping gas, things like that. And so because we're expected to do all of these things and we don't want to be in a place where we can't support ourselves, then what we're doing is we're taking away from the men's role of being able to be the provider and supporter. Um, and so that's the message that we're sending is we don't need you. And who wants to be told we don't need you? And so there's always that conversation between, how men and women, want to be needed or want to be wanted. That comes up quite often, actually.
Yeah, and it's a very, I mean, there's a fine line here. I mean, I think it's about trusting each other. I mean,
Mhm.
both people opening up to trust because I know that saying, I need you to just, I guess, I don't even like to use the word submit, but I think submit is really trust. When we say, I'm going to submit my heart to you. I mean, to me, that's the way I translate it. I'm not just saying you can do whatever you want with me,
Well,
but
yes. Yes. Women have a lot of us have I guess, what comes up with that word submissive
yeah,
and what that means. And so I actually have a different word that I would use. And
yes,
I would
let's hear
say,
it.
I receive. I
Ah,
receive your protection. I receive your love. I receive your place in guiding us through whatever. If you think of it that way, then it's really easy to be on the opposite side because receiving is just as important as that giving piece. So men can give and women can receive, and then it keeps everything in check. And then of course things always have to go back in the other direction as well. And so men can receive love and respect from women, and then everyone's happy, right? So
right.
if everyone is receiving love and respect, then the dynamic of the relationship can take on a whole new level when you think of it that way. When you're thinking, I'm going to submit or not submit to you, or I'm going to trust or not trust you, then it sends a whole different energy and emotion. But giving and receiving to me is a mutual exchange that can happen in both directions.
I love that. Yes. And I feel like people are very lost when it comes to relationships. I think that there's the walls that people put up, and the walls prevent authentic love. And so many people are in relationships, but it's not that depth of what it could be. I mean, what can you speak on that? I mean, for someone that might even think, what in the heck is she talking about?
Oh, yes, I will talk to the walls that people put up. So when you want to feel safe and you haven't had safety, you're going to put up the wall because the whole being vulnerable, it comes with risks. So if you have been in a relationship where someone has cheated on you, let's say, okay, well then when you go into another relationship and you're trying to rebuild from that, you're going to put up the walls because you remember the time where you let your walls down and it got you your partner picking somebody else over you, and so that self-worth goes out the window in some cases, and then you put up the wall because you want to be in connection, you want to be loved, but you don't, but only to a point. You don't want to be hurt like that again, so you're going to put the walls. Um, and so that's one example. The other example could be that maybe you lost somebody in your life, whether it was by death or by somebody leaving the relationship. Again, you put the walls up because you want to protect yourself from getting hurt again. And so everything that but people are putting walls up is to protect themselves from feeling pain. However, pain is not always poison. Okay. Sometimes pain has to come to us to teach us some lessons about how maybe we weren't putting out communication about our preferences or our boundaries that we needed to do when we went into a relationship. Maybe we didn't know how to advocate for ourselves or to communicate what it is that we needed. And so those things will happen when you aren't able to have that capacity or skill to do that. And so it'll stay that way until you learn that skill. And so, yes, I very much believe that vulnerability is like a superpower. So the moment you feel safe enough to become vulnerable, it actually sets the stage for the other person to become vulnerable, and it actually makes the connection more cohesive. And but that's counterintuitive to a lot of people. They feel like if I let down my walls and become vulnerable, it's going to be used against me. A lot of people will tell you that. A lot of men I worked with will say, I'm not going to let my wall down because the time that I was sensitive or the time I expressed what I wanted, I got shot down um and that made me feel terrible, and I'm not going to do that. I'm just not willing to do that. And I thought, well, that's sad. It's really sad when people can't feel like they can become vulnerable because someone's going to do something to them. And so what it's going to take is for them to get into a healthy, good relationship where they break that cycle and they actually experience what a good, healthy relationship feels and looks like. And once that happens to you, you won't go back to the other ones. You won't even entertain them.
Okay, so what I'm gathering is, I mean, I think you have to choose the right partner, right? Someone,
Yes.
and and so when if you're dating, the typical dates would probably not lead you to know that. How would you be able to find out, like with your sons, how would you, I mean, what advice would you give them on really finding the right partner?
Well, that's a good one there because I always think about these things because you want good partners for your children. Um, well, you're right. The typical date, you're not going to get too much depth because you're going to go to a movie and sit side by side and not talk. Yeah, you might go somewhere to eat and you're just going to be eating and you're doing that. Um, Honestly, I think the best way is for it's going to sound kind of corny, but like going out in nature and going for a walk where you can
Mm.
actually be in a place, in a space where you can actually have conversations and where you can talk about, where you see yourself, in your career or where would you like to live? Or, ask different questions about the preferences of where they are now and where they'd like to be. You start to get to know like what someone values. And so not only should they ask questions about preferences, but then to ask them to think about what they most value and think of ways they could communicate that to someone else and then invite that person to do the same. But I
Yeah,
think
that's
that's
very
what it
interesting.
is the
I think
value.
you're right because when I come across people that share with me, my child is dating this wonderful person, and then I'll say, "Well, tell me about it." And they'll say they got a great GPA and think, good looking or maybe on the track team. And I think, but what about the person, right? I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, that's wonderful, right? But I mean, that doesn't tell me about is that person going to treat my daughter or son well?
Yeah, because those are accolades. Accolades and achievements can fall away at any point. And so take away the achievements, take away the accolades. And you're right. Are they someone that's compassionate towards animals? Are they someone who does volunteering and gives back to the community? Are they someone that will sit with someone who is struggling and listen to them? Are they someone who would go out of their way to help somebody with a problem? Those are different ways that, you can look at some of those values and yes, and I think I mean, it sounds like it's a little bit of I guess a I guess a format to go down to tell young people to ask about people's preferences and values. But honestly, once you normalize that, asking like, would you prefer communication by phone or by video call? Do you value integrity? Do you value someone who can think on their feet? You start to ask different things about what people value, and that's where you're going to find out compatibility on who a person is through that exchange of values. And again, I think just teaching young people how to ask those questions in a way that feels natural. Because like right now, I'm unpacking. I thought, okay, that's a good task for me, for my children to figure out ways that I could share with them that they could ask those preference and value questions.
Right. And let's get to the heart of it, right?
Hmm.
And also, I mean, I think people are not aware of how to, when there's a conflict, how to repair that, the rupture repair, right? So there's always going to be conflicts, and
Oh,
that's,
yes, there is.
yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that is not addressed in the dating world now. So with me and I thought in an authentic relationship, it was addressed. I mean, I'm talking about it was addressed, and so I knew this person was safe. This person is safe, right?
Hmm.
Because they have an awareness and they want to talk about how is it going to be handled when there is conflict. We're not going to just pretend like, you look pretty and you're handsome, right? We're actually going to talk about some depth here. When there are issues, how are we going to work together?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great one. When anyone meets somebody, that's the one question that should come up. If we have a disagreement, how should we handle it? How do you like to handle it? And what does that look like? Because there's definitely communication models for handling conflict as opposed to avoiding conflict. And there's ways when emotions run high that you can de-escalate and still come back together, because conflict does not mean no anger and frustration. It's like if you so learning how to handle your own anger and frustration and then helping someone else to do the same. Again, that comes back down to when I see that you're angry, how would you like me to respond when I see you that way? And the person can say, well, when I'm angry and I'm rough around the edges, I need you to give me space and let me go off and think about something, and then I will come back in and we will have a discussion. So just knowing something like that. Um, and you can't assume, so you can't just assume that men want to go off and process and then come back, and that a woman wouldn't also want that. And then the converse could be true. Some people would rather, as soon as the conflict happens, to stay in it and not leave it until it's resolved successfully, whatever that looks like. So again, you're right. Finding out how a person wants to handle constructive criticism, conflict, um, fear, all these different things. And again, it boils back down to let's not be so afraid of what we assume that we don't have the conversation.
Well, that's very true. And when we talk about fear, I think that's a
Hmm.
green flag when people talk about what they're afraid of, right? Or where they've been taken down. Like, so what I used to fall into the trap, I'll tell you, in relationships is that I would hear a little bit of vulnerability in the beginning and I would think, wow. So I was sucked in by just one story, thinking this
Hmm.
person was so vulnerable. And I thought, well, they're going to open up about everything. And as I went on in the relationship, I saw, wait a minute. And not only was it just a vulnerability story, it was a victim story. So what I did learn later was the vulnerability has to keep going, and there has to be an awareness of what did I learn from that. And I mean, that's when, that's the connection when you're not afraid to keep sharing stories and you both talk about the stories and you support each other, but it's not just about like how wronged I was.
Yes, what I would add to what you just said too, when the vulnerability sharing starts, usually I always say let's slow it down to speed up. So when you're getting to know somebody and you're offering a little bit of that vulnerable side to yourself, do it in little bite-sized pieces. So you just give them a little bit and then you kind of see what they do with it. Do they do anything positive with it or negative or neutral? And you just do that. You just do a little bit of vulnerability to see where it is, see if it's still safe. It's still safe. Okay, you can be a little more vulnerable and you just kind of go down that way. Because I think some people will meet somebody and give them everything
I've
on
done that.
Oh, I've done it too. Believe me, that's why I'm like smiling here. I've done that. And then so my new thing is when I'm meeting people, it's slow down to speed up. So rather than like thinking, wow, I met this person and everything's wonderful about them and I just can't get enough of them and I want to see them all the time. We're going to do all these great things. We'll be going down the journey of bliss. No, it's like I'm getting to know someone for the very first time, and everyone always puts their good best self first. And so then let's see how we deal with conflict. Let's see how we deal with success and jealousy, and all the different ranges of things that could happen to a person. And you really you share little bits of things, and then you take your time, and then after 6 months or so, you probably have a pretty good idea of a person's preferences, their values, and how they show up in those different ways. But if you do it all in the first go around, you just set yourself up for giving away too much too soon, and that's when those other feelings that people express happen. Hmm.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I've gone on dates and just dumped my whole life story. Basically, I just was like spitting out, and that poor
You're so
guy.
happy to be connected,
I know,
probably.
I know. He was like, that was the first and last date, and I thought, oh my gosh, and yeah, and it was as I look back on it, I guess I was trying to make a connection, but I wasn't aware of his part in it, right? Could I stop talking and do more listening? So,
Yeah, more introspection based on the things that are being shared. And so getting it back to like what I want my boys and children, my daughter, to
mhm.
do when they're in their relationships as they're maturing and deciding what it is they want in life, and just learning how to navigate relationships in general, is the fact that teaching them along the way, like, you know things externally could go away. What else about the person might you want to find out? And when you're going to become vulnerable, doing small baby steps over time, and really like watching what a person's actions are versus what they say they're going to do or have done, and just having that all-inclusive awareness, and then remembering to listen to the way they feel when they're in the presence of somebody. Because I think that's a thing that tells you a lot, is how you feel when you're in the presence of someone, both that good and bad. And to listen to it, and to trust yourself. I think that's a skill, is learning how to navigate different spaces and trust your intuition, trust that gut feeling, just trust yourself to make the right decision. Because that's why we always say a person makes the best decision in that moment that they possibly could. And if they
Mm,
learn something later, then they know better, then they will do better the next time it comes around.
I love that because many times I would tell my friends, like, you did the best you could. And they were like, no, I didn't. But it's in that moment you
Uh-huh.
did, right? In the moment you were doing your best, right? And it changes all the time. I love that. So, And okay, so I want to kind of get back to the feelings in men
Mhm.
and with your boys. I love it that you allowed feelings. And did you ever see children that weren't allowed to feel or ever see the dynamic of stop it? Like with at, I guess at maybe little boys' games where the
That's what
fathers,
I was just going to say. I'm visualizing
yeah,
football, and baseball, because that's when, you know, one of the players gets hurt on the field and the father or mother or parents or, whoever's at that game watching could say, get up, you shake it off, go do it, or whatever.
uh-huh.
And so but I think when they start out when they're little, like that kindergarten, first grade, I think that sets the stage right there is how they experience the sports, and the disappointments or making errors then will drive the rest of their lives. And so as parents, you got to be real careful about what it is that you say, that messaging. So if you tell someone they're being a crybaby, or they can't tough it out, or these different things that you could say, there's one thing if you got a child that's just wanting attention and they're just all over the place. And so you got to say, you're going to have to sit with this for a bit and then we're going to talk, you know. But saying that you're a crybaby, you're whining, you're doing all these things, we do a disservice. And you're right, it comes up in the sports for sure. And that's a very visual playing field, metaphorically, because everyone can hear and see what you're getting told, and so that can be life changing. You say the wrong thing, and I don't think it's proper to be putting that much stress on young people if they make a mistake in a game. We all make mistakes. Would we like it if we were at work and somebody decides to publicly blast us and say, "Well, you just effed up this thing," I mean, that's the version of it on the playing field when they're young like that. You don't want to be publicly humiliated. So, we got to be wiser and think about how we're putting putting these expectations out there.
Yeah, and these are children, you're right. And to drive home that like this is more important than you, right? Winning is
Mhm.
more important than your feelings. So, yeah, I was a competitive tennis player as a little girl, and I remember this mother just basically her daughter had a nervous breakdown
Oh yeah,
because
it
she was
happens.
driving her, yeah,
Hmm.
and the daughter came back and she was shaking like, and I don't know why. I mean, I just remember thinking, what is she doing here, out here playing again? Because she can't even function. I mean, she is in such a wounded state, and there was that mother driving her again, and
Hmm.
it's just very sad to see that. Um, that we that is just cutting off all emotions and lack of empathy. And now I know that you studied Chris Voss.
Yes.
Chris Voss is an FBI negotiator, and he talks
Mhm.
about empathy a lot. And this is
Yes.
something that I think men, the word empathy has been made fun of or isn't even acknowledged or even known what empathy is. Like, what is empathy? And why is it important to teach empathy to a young man?
Yes, you know what? To make it probably sound more influential, he calls it tactical empathy.
Yeah.
And so really, we have found, and in the book they talk about how if you were negotiating a hostage takeover type of a thing, that the biggest easiest way to get into the mind of that person that's taken the hostage is through that empathy, because the reason why they're there doing that thing is because they're not getting some needs met, and all of a sudden you're saying, I see you, you must be really frustrated, and you could be doing that, and then you've also heard, I don't know, I've seen the thing where somebody gives somebody like that a hug, and that just melts them right away because they weren't seen, they weren't heard, they didn't feel valued, and so they were making some poor choices and putting themselves and others in danger. um and so the part of the question, can you ask it one more time about the tactical, why it's important? Is
Yeah,
that
why
what?
it's important.
Okay.
I don't even remember the
Okay.
question, but I was, like, what would you teach your boys about that?
Yes,
Or,
yes. Well, empathy is important. Think about, I mean, the sports recently just have shared that about and I'm going to get all of the football and baseball mixed up because they're both going on at the same time. But there was a situation where they had a player and his wife was having a baby. She lost the baby, so that was a big thing. He had to go out. He needed to go and be with his family. There was also another player that was experiencing, I think, the cancer of his mother. So he needed to go take care of his mother. So think about that. These are professional athletes in a being paid for their profession, and they were choosing their family over that sport. That's what should happen each and every time is we should put our family over our job, over our sports, or above all. And so to be able to do that and to have that care and compassion for that other man on the team, that's huge because you know how hard it would be to feel like you're letting your team down, but yet you need to go take care of your family, that wrestling you have to do. And so wasn't it much nicer that you have the compassion? Hey, you need to go take care of what's going on in your family and be there because, you only got one family, and so the sports team, they'll figure out how to pull it together and go on. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's very important when you have a relation, if you want to have a relationship with another, like a family relationship. I mean, not, I mean, as a woman and man or whatever type dynamic. I'm trying not to put it into that, but as you grow older from the,
Yes. Yeah, relationship.
child into the adult dynamic, to have empathy for the family first. And I see men that are struggling because they've been taught, and this is society that says
Hmm.
that work has to come first. I have to make the money and I have to, it doesn't matter. I have to stop wanting, I mean, not wanting, but I have to just put work first to provide for my family. Now, providing is wonderful, but when it means cutting off what your needs are, your emotional needs, and going to work every day instead of saying, could you help me to the partner?
Yes,
That's
thank you
when it
for
hurts. Go
saying
ahead.
this. Thank you for saying this. Because that's what I was thinking as we were talking about that, is that yes, there's that provider role and taking care of the family, but that does not mean that you sacrifice who you are and how you feel and what you need, because you're no good as a partner if your partner can't give to you to receive. So if you're in a situation where the finances are skewed and when there needs to be more coming in, well, then as a partner, how can I help you? What, maybe it means I go and get another job, or it might mean that I take on more of the cooking and cleaning of things that, and things that need to happen, scheduling so you could focus. Or maybe it means that, the roles could be reversed and that person could actually try to get some care for themselves. So some ways to reduce the stress by exercise, by doing some things that they find calming or grounding to them. And so that kind of empathy right there should be two-way. And just because the man is traditionally the provider does not mean that he needs to be the person to say that he comes last. Because we all know with the famous thing that we all say is you put your oxygen mask on first so that you can take care. Well, that same thing happens in for men. They should be doing the same thing, because if they're stressed out, depressed, all these different things that could be going on negatively, then nothing else is going to come together very well, and they're hurting their health of themselves and their families when they do that. And so that's where you hear about high suicide rates in men, because they try to shoulder and take it all on. They do it in silence because they think that's what they're supposed to do. When, us as women, we're looking at this and like, why are they doing that? That doesn't seem right. And so maybe we need to step up and say, hey, I can see you're totally stressed out. What can I do? What do you need right now that would support you? And just ask the question.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the guys that have said to you and me, when I
Hmm.
was vulnerable, they turned it against me.
Hmm.
So, I mean, as women, we have to support men to show all emotion. And
Mhm.
I don't even know where to go with that because that's not even something that little girls are taught,
Well,
right?
no,
You know?
no, and you're right. Let's say that they do ask for help or they do break down and cry, and you're like, well, why are you crying for this? Like you say you want them to express their emotions, so they do, and there's a space, and then you demean it and devalue it. Yeah, you do that too many times, you just ruined any kind of safe relationship that you have going forward, and it's going to be really hard to get that back.
Yes, definitely it is. And to be expressive, I mean, there are many men that are not even aware that they're wearing a mask. And when I say mask, is not being true to
To who?
themselves,
Hmm.
right? Because the
Hmm.
mask is built. It starts being built. It's like 3 and 4 years old when they learn I need to disconnect from myself. I need to disconnect from others to be in this man box. So if they don't even know that, then they're not aware of that. They're not aware that I'm wearing a mask. They think this is just who I am because this is the way I've been my whole life.
That's right. That's right. When you're a certain way for your whole life, then it's like you have to like unlearn it to be able to move in that healthy direction. So again, this is why the bringing up of boys to become healthy men, the proactive piece is so important because if you can start early, then there's a lot less unlearning to have to do, or maybe there won't be any. And that should become or can become the way that society can view masculinity. It begins when he's a boy and he learns all these things from men and women in his life. And so the end result or the thing that you're looking for is that man that feels secure in his skin, can feel his emotions, communicate his needs, and not have to fear um, in a way that he has to throw walls up in order to move through his life. And if you can instill those principles and practices when they're little, you're going to have men that are more resilient. And when things happen, they won't try to say, I'll do it myself. And they won't suffer in silence. They will say something because that's what they learned to do and they practiced when they were younger. So that's why I feel as strongly as I do about the prevention and education early on.
Right. This like I can do everything by myself. I don't need anyone is what men are being taught to say. And people telling me, like, oh, are you helpless or something? I'm not helpless, but I realize that I want to reach out to other people for help.
Yes.
And that's not something I'm ashamed of. I can help you with emotions, and there are many ways I can help you with. If you want to go train your dog, I can help you with that. But I'm aware of my capacities and I'm not ashamed to say, in this area, I could use your help. But men are, they're living in so much shame.
Hmm.
How, and what shame would you say is just such a hindrance to people that might not even know this?
I think it's the shame of not being able to be himself. As much as I think
Ah,
about the conversations I have, that's what really comes up is like they put a lot of pressure on themselves to perform and appear in a certain way. And so if you're a more feminine presenting male, let's say you're more in touch with your soft side, then they're like, oh gosh, I gotta be more alpha. I gotta be more manly. I mean, I'm not that guy, and they're like wrestling with it. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are you doing that? Everyone has a little bit of both, and each to their own. You're always going to find someone that's going to appreciate someone that's more in touch with their soft side. There's going to be people that might appreciate someone that's a little more of the stoic that you were talking about. Um, and so we're not necessarily advocating for absolutes. So it's not like you'd be very, very soft and nurturing or you're stoic. No, you can be a lot of things in between. What we're advocating for is that we drop the need to have to be a certain way because society or tells us that we need to be. Like, no, be the way that you want to be and you feel good showing up. That's the message that I want the men to hear is be who you are. The right people will be in your life. You'll be doing the right things. Just be who you are because when you show up as not, as somebody else or masked, then it puts a strain on you personally and it prevents you from having uh, healthy, connected relationships.
Yeah, it does. And you're pretending. How long can you continue to pretend? Are you going to pretend the rest of your life?
Yeah, and there's men that do. They do pretend for much of their life and then everything else falls away when they could have just decided to live differently and but that doesn't usually occur to them because no one has brought it to their awareness. So we're back to awareness is key for all of this.
Right, awareness. And it's very interesting when I will ask men about feelings, they will answer with a logical question. They won't, they'll say their thought, right? And
Yes.
so they don't have the awareness. They're not hearing the question. The question is about feelings, but they have shut it down so much. And so then they're not aware, hey, I don't even know what she's saying,
Well, it's hard
right?
for them to describe in words the feelings because
And yeah,
that's where the disconnect is. So the moment you can learn how to describe your feelings in words, then it gets easier. But again, it's like one of those things that if you haven't been exposed to it, you haven't learned it, then you're not going to know to go there. So again, advocacy, education, and having the support infrastructures to do that is so essential.
so how would if there's a man watching right now and says, I don't know about my feelings. I don't know what they are because they've shut them down for so long. I don't know how to identify them. I don't know how to deal with them. What would you say to that man is the first step?
I would say the first step is to look for a space where there's education on what feelings are, how to access them, and how to communicate them to yourself and others. And so, really, that could be a men's circle where that happens. It could be a men's workshop. It could be meeting with someone such as you or I that are men's coaches. And so, we have strategies behind how we unlock uh, emotions and feelings and we learn how to name them and how they come in and all of that. So those are the three ways that I can think of. So I guess that being open to wanting to learn and then finding someone or a space that can happen and being kind to yourself that you're not necessarily going to get it and embody it overnight. It's going to take a little bit of intentional inner work and practice to really be able to do that, to be able to name and manage your emotions.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is definitely find a safe space. I mean, you have to intentionally look for a safe space. You can't just go to any group. It has to be one that is open to sharing feelings and is open and non-judgmental because and as a woman creating that safe space for men and realizing that they're going through many things that are just as hindering and as heavy as we go through as women, the pressures of being skinny and beautiful and young, right? And they're with the pressures of being strong and never breaking down. I mean, we all have this heaviness that is put on us. And so being aware of that, not just saying, oh, well, you know, the men, they don't have anything to deal with. I have to be 100 and, 98 pounds or whatever. They have their own weights to carry.
Oh, they definitely do. I mean, those are other things that come up is, the the physique, performance in the bedroom, um, what else comes up? A lot of these different things. And so, the same things that women deal with, the opposite happens in the men's space. And so they're looking at the same things that we are, and they just might communicate it differently is basically it. And so it's like getting into a mindset that where we're listening to hear what they're sharing and allowing them to have that space just to be heard. That's the biggest thing that we can do as supporters, being that we're women, is to really truly listen, because we're not men, so we can't say that we understand. We can say that we empathize. We could share strategies behind how to maybe move through it that they could consider, but at the end of the day they have to, decide if they want to go down that road.
I
And
love that you said that. I love what you said about we can't say that we understand, because that's a quick fix
mhm.
sometimes. Like, oh, I understand what's going on, but do we really understand? Or we just
Mm-mm.
wanting to we just want it to be over. We just want to say, okay, I'm going to fix you here. I understand you. But really, the beautiful thing is holding the space, like you're saying, a safe space and listening where you can have a collaboration for healing.
Mhm. And it's one of those things that when you go to look for a space, you got to do your, I guess I want to say homework, but you might have to visit more than one space or more than one way of how people work with you. So some groups, it could be, you know, meditation, it could be journal prompting, it could be hiking. There's different ways that things can happen. And whether you like a small group or a big group, an online or an offline, think about what your preferences are, and go visit or go try out some and then see where you land. Because sometimes you just show up into a space and then you sit next to someone that is going through something like you, and it just feels like home when you can talk to that person and they see you, and they're the same gender as you and can understand you. And and in our work, people say, well, why women? How can women? Well, we're good at bringing people together, creating a space, having the nurturing, but at the same time, when topics come up where there's assumptions being made on gender, we can say, well, no, that's not how women usually see this. Or maybe, there's a way that they're trying to handle a conflict. And we could say, well, when you're handling a conflict with a woman, well, one thing you want to remember is that the moment you start raising your voice and yelling, you're gonna scare her, and she's not gonna be able to receive your message. She's just going to be afraid of you, and so you're just going to be back at square zero, for example. That's just one generality that I was using as an illustrative example.
No, very good points. And so I see we're coming to the end of our time, Linda. And how can everyone get a hold of you? Because I know you have circles and you work very diligently to be an advocate for men.
Yeah, so I have two ways that people can get a hold of me. So I am active on LinkedIn, and then the other way I can be reached is through my email, tilsonstrategies@gmail.com. Those are the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Wonderful. Okay, so is there any final words I mean, I'm just like letting all your information sink in, because I always need reminders, right? I mean, I'm always in the learning process, and I might learn something yesterday and then it might fly out. But it's so good to connect and have these relationships where I'm always reminded, get back into my ground, listen, like, right? Don't be sharing I mean, don't just share, and not have a mutual relationship. So this is beautiful. So do you have anything final words you could say to our audience?
I guess what I would like to say is thank you for coming and listening to our perspectives as we've shared what's important as we're raising boys to become men. And again, you said it. We're learning. So if we said something that maybe didn't resonate or you see it differently, we want you to share with us, because education is power, and we want to empower our boys and our men, and that is, we want to be able to do the things that you want and that you're looking for. So that would be my message.
Well, thank you, Linda. We will absorb your wisdom and we will get out there and be advocates for men and women and for the human race. So I really appreciate this. And I appreciate everyone for watching, and join us next week for the next episode of Uncaged Leaders. And remember, you are an uncaged leader also. Thank you, everyone.